The transport ship carrying the human delegation docked at Nexus 7 with a soft hiss. Ji-won pressed her face against the window, watching the massive station spin slowly in the darkness of space. She had dreamed of this moment for years. First contact with dozens of alien species all gathered in one place. "Stop drooling on the glass," Hyun said from behind her. The security officer was checking his equipment for the third time. He always did that when he was nervous. Ji-won smiled but didn't move. "I'm not drooling. I'm observing. You're a xenobiologist, not a window cleaner," Day added with a laugh. The engineer was sprawled across two seats, completely relaxed. Nothing ever seemed to worry him. Suki, the medical officer, walked over to join Ji-won at the window. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "All those different ships, all those different worlds." The station was enormous. It looked like a giant wheel floating in space with hundreds of docking ports along its edges. Ships of every size and shape were attached to it like flowers on a stem. Some were sleek and silver. Others were rough and covered in strange markings. The humans had never seen anything like it. Their ship finished docking and the airlock opened. The four of them grabbed their bags and stepped into the station. The corridor beyond was huge, with ceilings that stretched up 3 stories high. Aliens walked past them in every direction. Some had fur, some had scales, and some seemed to be made of something else entirely. The air smelled strange, like metal mixed with something sweet. "Stay together," Hyun said quietly. His hand rested on his hip near where his weapon would be, but they had agreed to come unarmed as a sign of peace. A tall alien approached them. It had blue skin and 4 arms. "Welcome, humans," it said in perfect English. "I am your guide. Follow me to the diplomatic wing." They walked through the station for 20 minutes. Everywhere they looked, aliens stared back at them. Some seemed curious. Others seemed suspicious. A few looked afraid. Humans were new to the galactic community. Nobody knew what to expect from them. The guide led them to a large circular room with windows that looked out into space. "This is the diplomatic hall," it explained. "Representatives from 40 species are here. Please be respectful. Many cultures are present." Ji-won nodded, trying to remember everything from her training. "Don't touch anyone without permission. Don't make sudden movements. Smile, but not too much. Some species see showing teeth as a threat." The hall was filled with aliens. They stood in small groups talking in languages that sounded like music or grinding rocks or rushing water. In the center of the room was a massive hologram showing the galaxy. Little lights marked different territories and trade routes. "There," Day whispered, pointing. "Those must be the Velkari." Ji-won followed his gaze and felt her breath catch. The Velkari were massive. They stood at least 8 feet tall, with thick armor-like skin that looked gray and rough. Their faces were angular, with eyes that glowed a soft orange. They had powerful limbs and claws that could probably tear through steel. They looked like predators, like warriors, like nothing humanity had ever encountered. "They're beautiful," Suki whispered. "They're terrifying," Hyun corrected. The Velkari noticed the humans watching them. One of them, larger than the others and wearing a golden band around its arm, walked toward them. The crowd parted quickly to let it pass. Nobody wanted to get in a Velkari's way. "Humans," the Velkari said. Its voice was deep and rumbled like thunder. "I am Ambassador Velkros. Welcome to Nexus 7, Ji-won stepped forward. "Thank you, Ambassador. We're honored to be here." Velkros studied them for a long moment. "You are small," it said. "Fragile looking. But we hear you are brave." "We try to be," Ji-won replied carefully. The Velkari ambassador nodded slowly. "There is something you must know. A rule that cannot be broken." Its orange eyes grew more intense. "We have young ones here, cubs. They are in the sanctuary dome on the eastern section of the station." "Cubs?" Suki asked. "You brought your children here?"
"Yes, they must learn about other species."
"But you must never approach them." Velkros leaned down closer and Ji-won could feel the heat coming from its body. "The cubs are sacred. They are also extremely dangerous. Every species in this galaxy knows this rule. If you approach the cubs, you will die. We will not be able to stop it." The words hung in the air like a threat. Hyun tensed beside Ji-won and she could see his jaw tighten. "We understand," Ji-won said. "We'll stay away." "See that you do," Velkros said, then turned and walked back to the other Velkari. For the rest of the day, the humans met different alien species. They learned about trade routes and cultural customs. They ate strange foods and tried to pronounce impossible names. But Ji-won couldn't stop thinking about the cubs. That evening, after the meetings ended, she found herself walking through the station. She told herself she was just exploring, but somehow her feet carried her toward the eastern section, toward the sanctuary dome. She found it after 30 minutes of walking. It was a huge, transparent dome attached to the side of the station. Inside, she could see trees and grass and rocks. It looked almost like Earth. And there, playing near a small stream, were the cubs. They were smaller than the adults, only about 4 feet tall. Their armor-like skin was softer, still gray but with hints of silver. They wrestled with each other, rolling and tumbling in the grass. One of them splashed in the water while another climbed a tree. Ji-won watched them from outside the dome. They looked like children, just children playing. She didn't see the dangerous creatures that everyone feared. She saw youngsters who were kept away from everyone, isolated and alone. You shouldn't be here. Ji-won turned to find Hyun standing behind her. He didn't look angry, just concerned. I know, she said. I just wanted to see them. And? They don't look dangerous. They look lonely. Hyun stepped up beside her and watched the cubs for a moment. Maybe they're both, he said quietly. The galaxy has survived this long by being careful. By following the rules. Maybe, Ji-won said, but she wasn't sure she believed it. One of the cubs looked up and saw them through the dome. It tilted its head, studying them with bright orange eyes. For a moment, Ji-won and the cub just stared at each other. Then the cub's mouth opened in what might have been a smile. Showing rows of sharp teeth, Ji-won smiled back, forgetting the rule about showing teeth. The cub made a sound that might have been a laugh. Come on, Hyun said, gently pulling her arm. We should get back. As they walked away, Ji-won looked back once more. The cub was still watching them, its head still tilted in curiosity. Something in its eyes looked intelligent, aware, and yes, lonely. She had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time she visited the dome. The galaxy had rules about the cubs, rules written in fear and blood and centuries of experience. But Ji-won was a scientist, and scientists asked questions that others were afraid to ask. What if everyone was wrong about the cubs? What if they just needed someone brave enough to see them differently? Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow I'll learn more. But tomorrow would bring something none of them expected. Tomorrow everything would change. The next morning started like any other day on Nexus 7. Minho was in the botanical gardens tending to the plants that had been brought from Earth. The quiet space was his favorite place on the station. Away from the crowds and the endless meetings, he could focus on something simple and beautiful. The plants didn't care that he was human or alien. They just needed water and light and care. He was checking the soil in a row of tomato plants when the lights flickered. Once, twice, then went completely dark. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, painting everything in red. Attention all personnel, a mechanical voice announced over the speakers. Power fluctuation detected. Please remain calm. Engineers are working to restore full power. Minho wasn't worried. Power problems happen sometimes on a station this big. He went back to his plants, using the dim red light to continue his work. The gardens were sealed off from the rest of the station anyway. He was perfectly safe here. 15 minutes later, he heard screaming. It came from outside the gardens, distant but getting closer. Minho stood up, his heart beginning to race. The screaming wasn't just one person, it was dozens, maybe hundreds, and beneath it he heard another sound, a sound like heavy footsteps and low growling. The door to the gardens burst open. A small alien with purple fur ran inside, its eyes wide with terror. It saw Minho and screamed even louder, then ran back out into the corridor. Wait, Minho called. What's wrong? But the alien was already gone. More aliens ran past the open door. They were all running in the same direction, away from something. Minho heard someone shout in a language he didn't understand, but the fear in the voice was clear. Then he heard the word that made his blood run cold. Cubs! Minho's hand went to his communicator. This is Minho, he said quickly. I'm in the botanical gardens. Something's happening. People are running and screaming about cubs. Minho, get out of there now. It was Yunha, the pilot. She sounded out of breath, like she was running too. The sanctuary dome's barriers failed. The cubs escaped. 3 of them are loose in the civilian sector. Get to a safe room and lock the door. I'm in the gardens, I'll hide here. No, the cubs can break through. The communication cut out. The power flickered again, and this time even the emergency lights went dark for a few seconds. When they came back on, Minho heard something new, heavy breathing. Footsteps. Close. Very close. He looked around frantically. The gardens were big, but there was only one door. He couldn't leave without running into whatever was out there. The plants wouldn't hide him. There was a storage shed. In the corner, but would it be strong enough? The decision was made for him. 3 shapes appeared in the doorway. The cubs. They were smaller than adult Velkari, but still bigger than Minho. Their gray skin gleamed in the red light. Their orange eyes glowed as they scanned the room. Their claws clicked against the metal floor. One of them sniffed the air, then growled low in its throat. Minho's mind raced. Every instinct told him to run, to hide, to fight. But he had heard the stories. The cubs were predators. They responded to fear with aggression. They tested strength with violence. Every species that had ever encountered them had learned that the hard way. But Minho wasn't every species. He was human. He did something that no one else in the galaxy would have thought to do. He sat down. Right there, in the middle of the garden path, he crossed his legs and placed his hands in his lap. He took a slow breath and tried to calm his racing heart. The cubs froze. They looked at each other, confused. This wasn't normal behavior. Prey ran. Predators attacked. But this strange creature just sat there. The largest cub took a step forward. Minho didn't move. He kept his breathing steady and his eyes soft. Not challenging, not afraid, just calm. The cub came closer. It lowered its head and sniffed Minho's hair. Its breath was hot and smelled like metal. One wrong move, Minho knew, and those teeth would tear him apart. "Hey there," Minho whispered softly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The cub tilted its head, just like G1 had seen one do the night before. It made a small sound, almost like a question. The other 2 cubs moved closer now, their curiosity overcoming their caution. One of them noticed the tomato plants and walked over to investigate. It pawed at the leaves gently, careful not to crush them. "You like plants?" Minho asked, his voice still quiet. "Me too. That's why I'm here." The smallest cub sat down next to Minho. It was so close that their shoulders touched. The cub was warm, and Minho could feel it trembling slightly. Was it scared too? Were these dangerous creatures actually just frightened children, lost and confused in a strange place? "It's okay," Minho said again. "You're safe here." The cub leaned against him, and Minho slowly, carefully raised his hand. He placed it gently on the cub's head. The skin felt rough, but warm. The cub made a sound like a purr. That's when Jiwan and Hyun burst through the door. They had been searching for Minho since the alarm went out. They expected to find him hiding or running or worse. What they found instead made them stop in their tracks. Minho sat in the garden with 3 Velkari cubs around him. One leaned against his shoulder. One was investigating the plants. The largest one was lying down nearby, watching everything with bright, intelligent eyes. "Don't move," Jiwan whispered. "I'm not planning to," Minho replied with a small smile. "I think they're friendly." Friendly? Hyun couldn't believe what he was seeing. "These are the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy." "They're children," Minho said simply. "Scared children who got lost." The largest cub noticed Jiwan and Hyun. It stood up, placing itself between them and Minho. Protective. A low growl rumbled in its throat. Jiwan understood immediately. The cub wasn't threatening them. It was protecting Minho, because Minho had shown it kindness instead of fear. She slowly lowered herself to the ground, copying Minho's position. "Hyun," she said quietly. "Sit down." Slowly. "Are you crazy?" "Trust me." Hyun muttered something under his breath but did as she asked. The 3 humans sat in the garden while the 3 cubs watched them. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the smallest cub walked over to Jiwan. It sniffed her hand, then nuzzled against her palm. Jiwan felt tears prick her eyes. The cub's skin was rough, but its touch was gentle, curious, affectionate. Hello, she whispered. I'm Jiwan. The cub made a happy sound. Outside in the corridor, they could hear more footsteps approaching, heavy ones, adult Velkari coming to find their cubs, and they would expect to find bloodshed and death. That's what always happened when someone got too close to the cubs. They're coming, Hyun said. The adults. What do we do? We stay calm, Jiwon said, and we show them that their cubs are safe. The door opened wider, and Ambassador Velkros entered. Behind him were 6 other adult Velkari, all armed and ready for battle. They froze when they saw the scene before them. Their cubs. Their precious, dangerous cubs. Sitting peacefully with humans. One was being petted like a domestic animal. Another was showing Minho a flower it had picked. The third was playing with the edge of Hyun's jacket. What? Velkros couldn't find words. In all his years, in all the history of his people, nothing like this had ever happened. They're okay, Minho said quickly. They're not hurt. They came in here and I sat down. They were curious, not aggressive. Curious? One of the other Velkari repeated. Our cubs don't get curious. They test. They fight. Maybe they do that because everyone else is afraid of them, Jiwon suggested carefully. She kept petting the smallest cub, who was now making a sound like a happy rumble. Maybe they respond to how others treat them. Velkros stared at her. The idea was impossible, ridiculous, against everything his people had learned over thousands of years. But he couldn't deny what he was seeing. His cubs, content, peaceful, happy with humans. How? He finally asked. Jiwon looked up at him. We didn't see them as dangerous. We saw them as children. The smallest cub chose that moment to climb into Jiwon's lap. It curled up like a cat and closed its eyes, completely trusting. Velkros felt something shift in his chest. A feeling he couldn't name. These small, fragile humans had done something impossible. Perhaps humans were more remarkable than anyone had realized. The next few hours passed in a blur. Ambassador Velkros called for an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council. Representatives from every species on the station gathered in the main chamber. The room buzzed with shocked whispers and disbelieving stares. The humans sat together in one section, trying to ignore the attention. This is unprecedented, said a tall alien with silver scales and too many eyes. The Velkari cubs have never behaved this way with any species. We saw it with our own eyes, replied a floating creature that looked like a jellyfish made of light. The humans were sitting with them. The cubs were calm, happy even. It must be a trick, another alien insisted. Some kind of human technology or chemical manipulation. Taeyang, the human cultural liaison, stood up. He was older than the others, with gray hair and a calm presence that demanded respect. There's no trick, he said clearly. My colleague simply treated the cubs with kindness instead of fear. Kindness? The word came from Ambassador Velkros, who sat with the other Velkari at the front of the room. You speak as if kindness matters to predators. All children respond to kindness, Taeyang replied. Even predators. Especially predators. A smaller alien with green fur and large ears spoke up nervously. But we've tried everything with Velkari cubs. We've offered food, shelter, respect. They still attack. Every single time. How do you offer those things? Asked Bora. The human anthropologist had been quiet until now, but her voice cut through the noise. Do you approach them with confidence? With authority? With fear? The small alien hesitated. Well, yes, we must show strength. That's what predators understand. No, Bora said firmly. That's what triggers them. They're testing you, and you're failing the test by treating it like a battle. Velkros stood up slowly. His massive form cast a shadow across the room. Explain, he commanded. Bora took a breath. She had studied hundreds of species, including her own. This was what she had trained for. In human development, children test boundaries. They push to see how adults will react. If adults respond with anger or fear, children learn to be aggressive. If adults respond with patience and calm, children learn to trust. Our cubs are not human children, Velkros said. No, but they're still children, Bora continued. Every species we've studied shows some form of this behavior. Young ones testing, learning, growing. The problem is that every species in this galaxy approaches your cubs the same way. With fear or with a show of strength or with aggression, so the cubs respond with the only language they think you speak. Violence. She's right, G1 added, standing up beside Bora. I watched the cubs in the garden. When Minho sat down and stayed calm, they didn't know what to do. He wasn't prey because he didn't run. He wasn't a threat because he didn't challenge them. He was just there, peaceful. So they became peaceful too. The room erupted in arguments. Some aliens believed the humans. Others thought it was impossible. A few demanded proof. But Velcros raised one massive hand and silence fell immediately. I need to understand this, he said, looking directly at Taeyang. You're saying that for thousands of years we've been raising our cubs wrong? Not wrong, Taeyang said carefully. Just incomplete. You've protected them, trained them, prepared them to be warriors. But maybe they need more than that. Maybe they need connection. Connection, Velcros repeated the word slowly as if tasting it. With outsiders? With anyone who shows them kindness, Taeyang said. Another Velkari elder stood up. She was older than Velcros, with scars covering her armor-like skin. This is dangerous talk, she said in a voice like grinding stone. Our cubs are sacred because they're strong. We've survived as a species because we're warriors. If we make them soft, we're not talking about making them soft, Hyun interrupted. He had been quiet until now, but he couldn't stay silent anymore. We're talking about giving them choices. Teaching them that strength isn't just about fighting. The old Velkari turned her glowing eyes on him. And what do you know of strength, small human? I know that the strongest person isn't always the one who wins the fight, Hyun said, meeting her gaze without flinching. It's the one who knows when not to fight. The one who can protect without destroying. That's real strength. The old Velkari studied him for a long moment. Then surprisingly she laughed. It was a deep rumbling sound. Perhaps there is wisdom in these small creatures after all. Velcros looked around the room, then back at the humans. I want to try something, he said. An experiment. If what you say is true, then perhaps there is something we can learn. I propose a trial program. Humans will interact with our cubs under supervision. We will see if this connection is real or just luck. Absolutely not, shouted several aliens at once. It's too dangerous. The humans will be killed. This violates every protocol. But Velcros held up his hand again. I have decided. The cubs chose to be peaceful with the humans. I want to know why. I need to know why. He turned to Taeyang. Will you accept this responsibility? Taeyang looked at his fellow humans. Jiwon nodded eagerly. Minho smiled. Even Hyun, despite his concerns, gave a small nod. Bora's eyes shone with excitement. This was the chance of a lifetime. A chance to bridge two species in a way that had never been done before. We accept, Taeyang said. The room exploded in protests again, but Velcros ignored them. He walked over to the humans, and they had to crane their necks to look up at him. If anything goes wrong, he said quietly, if even one of my cubs is harmed or frightened, this ends immediately. We understand, Taeyang assured him. And if you are harmed, Velcros continued, we cannot guarantee your safety. The cubs are still young, still learning. They might hurt you without meaning to. We understand that too, Jiwon said. Velcros nodded slowly. Tomorrow then. We begin tomorrow. I will select 3 cubs for the program. The same 3 from the garden incident. They've already shown interest in you. After the meeting ended, the humans gathered in their quarters. Dee, who had been helping with station repairs during the incident, finally heard the full story. So let me get this straight, he said, looking at each of them in turn. We're going to babysit the most dangerous children in the galaxy? Basically, Minho said with a grin. This is insane. Probably, Jiwon agreed. But it's also amazing. Do you realize what this means? If we can bridge this gap with the Velkari, it changes everything. It shows that humans have something unique to offer the galaxy. Suki walked in carrying medical supplies. She had been preparing for the program, making sure she had everything needed to treat potential injuries. I've been reading about Velkari biology, she said. Their cubs are incredibly strong even at this age. If one of them accidentally hits you, it could break bones. That's cheerful, Day muttered. But, Suki continued, they also have excellent control when they want to. The problem is that they've never had a reason to use that control before. Everyone expects them to be violent, so they are. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, Bora said, pulling up data on her tablet. I've been looking at Earth's history with apex predators. Wolves, big cats, even sharks. For years, humans feared them and killed them. But when we started studying them with respect instead of fear, we learned they weren't mindless killers. They were intelligent creatures with complex social structures. So we're basically going to treat the cubs like, what, puppies? Hyun asked. More like children, Jiwon corrected. Smart, strong, curious children who need guidance and boundaries and, yes, affection. Yoonha, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. I think you're all brave, she said, and maybe a little crazy. But if this works, you're going to change the galaxy. If it works, Hyun emphasized. It will work, Minho said with confidence. I felt it in the garden. Those cubs weren't looking for a fight. They were looking for connection. We just have to show them that connection is possible. That night, Jiwon couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the smallest cub, the one who had climbed into her lap. She had felt its warmth, heard its happy sounds, seen the trust in its eyes. It wasn't a monster. It was a child. Tomorrow they would begin the program. Tomorrow they would prove that humans had something special to offer the galaxy. Not advanced weapons or superior technology, but something simpler and more powerful. The ability to see others not as they appeared, but as they could be. The courage to show kindness when everyone else showed fear. The wisdom to know that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is care. Jiwon smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow would change everything. The first day of the program started early. The humans met outside the sanctuary dome with Ambassador Velcros and 2 other Velkari adults. A crowd had gathered to watch. Aliens from dozens of species stood at a safe distance, their expressions ranging from curious to horrified. This is historical, someone whispered. Either way, it's historical. Sora and Jiho had arrived overnight specifically for this program. Sora was a child psychologist from Earth, small and gentle with kind eyes. Jiho was an educator, young and energetic, always ready with a smile. They stood with the others, waiting nervously. Remember, Sora said quietly to the group, no sudden movements. Keep your voices calm. If a cub does something you don't like, redirect rather than punish. Positive reinforcement only. And if they try to eat us? Day asked. He had insisted on being part of the program despite his jokes. They won't, Sora assured him. Predators don't eat what they're bonded with. We just need to form that bond. Velcros opened the sanctuary dome's door. The 3 cubs are waiting inside. They remember you from the garden. I will remain nearby, but I won't interfere unless necessary. The humans stepped inside. The dome was beautiful, filled with plants and rocks and a small stream that bubbled over smooth stones. The 3 cubs were playing near a tree. When they saw the humans, they stopped. The largest cub growled softly. Not threatening, just uncertain. Jiwon sat down in the grass just like before. One by one, the others did the same. They formed a loose circle, leaving space for the cubs to approach if they wanted. Hey there, Minho called softly. Remember us? The smallest cub's ears perked up. It recognized Minho's voice. Slowly, carefully, it walked over. The other 2 cubs followed, curious but cautious. Good morning, Jiwon said with a smile. We brought something for you. Jiho pulled out a ball from his bag. It was soft, made of fabric, and filled with something light. He rolled it gently toward the cubs. The middle-sized cub pounced on it immediately, then looked confused when it didn't fight back. It's a toy, Jiho explained. For playing, watch. He retrieved the ball and squeezed it. It made a soft honking sound. The cub's eyes went wide with surprise. What happened next made everyone watching gasp. The cub made a sound. Not a growl or a roar, a laugh. A clear, joyful laugh. The cub grabbed the ball and squeezed it, making it honk again. Then it laughed again, looking at the other cubs as if to say, Did you see that? Soon all 3 cubs were playing with the ball, taking turns making it honk and laughing at the sound. The humans watched with growing smiles. These weren't dangerous beasts. They were children discovering toys for the first time. Can we join you? Sora asked the cubs gently. The largest cub, still the most cautious, studied her for a moment. Then it picked up the ball in its mouth and brought it to her. An offering. A game. Sora took the ball and threw it gently across the dome. All 3 cubs raced after it, tumbling over each other in their excitement. The smallest one reached it first and brought it back to Sora, dropping it at her feet. Good job, Sora said, her voice full of praise. She threw it again, and again the cubs raced after it. They spent the next hour playing simple games. Fetch, hide and seek, follow the leader. The cubs learned quickly, their intelligence obvious. They understood rules and took turns and even showed concern when Day pretended to trip and fall. The middle cub rushed over to check if he was okay, making worried sounds. "I'm fine," Day said, sitting up and patting the cub's head. "Thanks for checking on me." The cub nuzzled his hand, relieved. Outside the dome, the watching crowd was silent with shock. Ambassador Velcro stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. But G1 noticed something. His eyes were soft, proud. He was seeing his cubs in a new way. Over the next few days, the program continued. Each day, the bonds grew stronger. The humans taught the cubs simple things: how to be gentle with smaller creatures, how to share, how to express feelings without violence. And the cubs taught the humans, too. They showed them Velkari games and songs. They shared their food even though it smelled terrible to human noses. They protected the humans from anything they perceived as a threat, even if it was just a loud noise. By the end of the first week, something remarkable happened. The smallest cub refused to leave Suki's side. It followed her everywhere. When she sat, it sat beside her. When she worked in the medical bay, it watched through the window waiting for her to come back. When she slept, it curled up outside her door. "You've got a shadow," Yunha teased. Suki smiled, looking at the cub through the window. Its orange eyes were fixed on her, patient and loyal. "I don't mind," she said softly. "I think it's sweet." Other species began to take notice. Aliens who had avoided the dome now came to watch. They saw cubs playing with humans, learning from them, trusting them. Word spread throughout the galaxy. Humanity, the newest species to join the galactic community, had done the impossible. Not everyone was happy about it. A group of traditionalist aliens complained to the council. "This is unnatural," they argued. "Velkari cubs should be warriors, not pets." But Velcro shut down those complaints immediately. "My cubs are learning to be stronger, not weaker," he said firmly. "They're learning control, discipline, choice. These are the marks of true warriors, not mindless beasts." He was right. The cubs were changing. They were calmer, more focused. They still played rough with each other, but they were gentle with the humans. They still had their predator instincts, but they knew when to use them and when to hold back. One day, Jiho set up a classroom in the dome. He brought tablets and books and teaching materials. "Let's see if they can learn to read," he said. Everyone thought he was crazy, but the cubs proved them wrong. They learned symbols and patterns. They learned to recognize words. The largest cub even learned to use a tablet, pressing buttons with careful precision to answer questions. "They're gifted," Bora said, watching from outside the dome. "Their intelligence is remarkable. They've just never had anyone treat them like they were capable of learning." Sora worked with the cubs on emotional regulation. She taught them breathing exercises. She showed them how to express anger or frustration without lashing out. She used puppets and stories and games to help them understand complex feelings. "How do you feel when someone takes your toy?" she asked the middle cub one day. The cub growled softly. "Mad?" Sora suggested. The cub nodded. "It's okay to feel mad, but what can you do instead of biting?" The cub thought for a moment, then reached out and gently tapped Sora's hand. It was a gesture they had practiced. A way to say, "I don't like that," without violence. "Perfect," Sora praised. "You're so smart." The cub made a happy rumbling sound, pleased with itself. By the end of the second week, the change in the cubs was obvious to everyone. They were still strong, still formidable, still clearly predators, but they were also kind, playful, curious, and loving. They had become what every child should be, safe to be themselves. The smallest cub, the one bonded to Suki, showed the most dramatic change. It learned to be incredibly gentle. It would carefully take food from Suki's hand, never biting down too hard. It would rest its head on her lap while she read medical reports, content to just be near her. "I think it loves you," Jiwon said one evening, watching them together. "I know it does," Suki replied, stroking the cub's rough skin. "And I love it too." The words hung in the air. Love, between a human and a Velkari cub. An impossible bond, formed through kindness and patience and the simple act of seeing another being for what it truly was. News of the program reached Earth. Messages poured in: congratulations, questions, offers to send more people to help. Humanity was proving itself to be valuable to the galactic community in a way no one had expected. But not everyone was happy about humanity's success. In the dark corners of the galaxy, in the territories of species who saw Earth as a threat, plans were being made. Plans to show the galaxy that humans were weak, that their compassion was a flaw, not a strength. Plans that would soon put everything to the test. On Nexus 7, unaware of the danger coming, the humans and cubs continued their daily routine. They played and learned and grew together. The bond between them was real and strong. Soon that bond would have to prove just how strong it really was. The attack came without warning. It was the third week of the program, and the humans had just finished an afternoon session with the cubs. Jiwon was walking through the civilian sector with Suki and the smallest cub, who refused to be left behind. The cub walked between them, its head swiveling to look at everything with curious eyes. "I need to submit our weekly report," Jiwon said, checking her tablet. "The council wants updates on the cubs' progress." "Tell them the cubs are doing better than anyone expected," Suki said with a smile. She reached down to pat the cub's head, and it made a happy sound. That's when the lights went out. All of them, not just a flicker, but complete darkness. Emergency protocols should have kicked in, but nothing happened. The station was completely dark and silent. "What's going on?" Suki whispered. Before Jiwon could answer, an explosion rocked the station. The floor shook and alarms started blaring. Red emergency lights finally came on, but they were dim and flickering. "Attention all personnel," a voice crackled over the speakers. "We are under attack. This is not a drill. All civilians proceed to safe rooms immediately. Armed personnel report to..." The message cut off. Another explosion, closer this time. People started screaming and running in every direction. Aliens of all species pushed past each other, desperate to escape. Jiwon grabbed Suki's arm. "We need to find the others." They started running, the cub keeping pace beside them. Its orange eyes were wide, and it made nervous sounds. It could sense the danger, the fear in the air. More explosions. The station shuddered. Parts of the ceiling began to fall, crashing down in showers of sparks and metal. An alien stumbled and fell near them, injured. The cub immediately moved to stand between the alien and potential danger, growling protectively. "It's okay," Jiwon told the cub quickly. "We need to keep moving." They found Hyun and Minho in a corridor that was filling with smoke. Hyun had his weapon drawn, which meant the situation was serious. They had agreed to carry weapons only in extreme emergencies. "It's the Krill Dominion," Hyun said quickly. "They're boarding the station. At least 50 soldiers, maybe more. They're specifically targeting the human delegation." "Why?" Minho asked, coughing from the smoke. "Because we're making the galaxy see us as valuable," Jiwon realized with horror. "They want to eliminate us before we become too important." "We need to get to the safe room," Hyun said. "The others are already there. It's in the central sector, but the Krill are between us and there." They had no choice but to try. The 5 of them moved through the damaged corridors, trying to avoid the fighting. They could hear weapons fire and screaming. The Krill soldiers were ruthless, attacking anyone who got in their way. They almost made it. They were just 3 corridors away from the safe room when they turned a corner and found themselves facing a dozen Krill soldiers. The aliens were tall and covered in black armor, with weapons that glowed an angry red. "Humans," the lead Krill said, his voice distorted by his helmet. "How fortunate. Our main targets delivered to us." Hyun raised his weapon, but he was 1 person against 12. Minho and Jiwon moved to stand beside him anyway, ready to fight even though they knew it was hopeless. Suki pulled the cub behind her, trying to protect it. The cub had other ideas. It pushed past Suki and stood in front of all 4 humans, placing itself between them and the Krill. It was small compared to an adult Velkari, barely reaching the shoulders of the Krill soldiers. But it bared its teeth and growled with a ferocity that made the Krill hesitate. "A Velkari cub?" The lead Krill laughed. "Even better. We'll kill it too. Show the galaxy that humans can't even protect what they claim to care for." He raised his weapon. The cub didn't move. It would die before it let them hurt the humans. That's when 2 more cubs came around the corner behind the Krill, the largest and the middle-sized one from the program. They had been with Jiho and Sora, but somehow they had sensed danger. Somehow they had known their human friends needed help. The Krill didn't see them coming. The cubs attacked from behind with devastating efficiency. They weren't playing now. They weren't curious or gentle. They were warriors, just like their species had always been. But they were warriors with purpose, fighting to protect those they loved. The largest cub took down 3 Krill soldiers in seconds. Its claws tore through their armor like paper. The middle cub moved like lightning, fast and precise, disabling weapons and knocking soldiers off their feet. And the smallest cub, no longer hiding behind Suki, leaped at the lead krill with a roar that echoed through the corridor. The fight was over in less than a minute. The krill soldiers lay on the ground, unconscious or too injured to move. The three cubs stood over them, breathing hard, their orange eyes blazing. But when they looked at the humans, their expressions softened. The smallest cub immediately went to Suki, pressing against her legs as if to make sure she was okay. She wrapped her arms around its neck, tears streaming down her face. "You saved us," she whispered. More krill soldiers appeared at the end of the corridor, but before they could attack, a roar shook the entire station. Adult Velkari had arrived. Velkros led the charge with 20 warriors behind him. They had heard the fighting. They had come to protect the station, but they stopped in shock when they saw the cubs. The three youngsters stood together in front of the humans, still in fighting stances, still ready to defend them. They hadn't run to the adult Velkari for protection. They had chosen to protect the humans instead. "Impossible," breathed one of the Velkari warriors. But Velkros understood. His cubs had made their choice. They had chosen loyalty to those who had shown them kindness. They had chosen to fight not out of instinct or training, but out of love. "Protect the humans," Velkros commanded, "and be proud. Our cubs have shown what true warriors are meant to be." The battle for Nexus 7 lasted another hour. The Krill Dominion forces were driven back by the combined efforts of the station's defenders. But the turning point came when the cubs refused to leave the human side. Other species saw it. They saw 3 young Velkari standing guard over 4 humans, ready to die for them if necessary. Word spread through the battle. The cubs chose the humans. The cubs protect them. The most dangerous children in the galaxy had become humanity's most loyal defenders. When the fighting finally ended, the station was damaged but standing. Casualties were surprisingly light, mostly because the Krill had focused on the human delegation and the cubs had stopped them. Wu Jin, the human ambassador who had been in the safe room, came running the moment it was safe. "Is everyone all right?" he asked, looking at his people with obvious relief. "We're fine," Jiwan said. "Thanks to them?" She gestured to the cubs who were sitting with the humans. They were exhausted, some of them injured, but they wouldn't leave. The smallest cub was curled up against Suki, its eyes half closed but still alert. Ambassador Velkros approached them slowly. His armor was damaged and he had wounds from the fighting. But he walked with pride. He looked at the cubs, then at the humans, then back at the cubs. "They chose," he said simply. "In our entire history, cubs have never chosen. They follow instinct, follow training, follow their parents. But today my cubs made a choice. They chose loyalty. They chose love. They chose you." "We chose them too," Suki said softly, stroking the smallest cub's head. "From the first moment we saw them, we chose to see them as they really are." Velkros knelt down, bringing his massive form closer to the humans. "You have done something no species has ever done. You looked at our cubs and saw not danger, but potential. You gave them something we never thought to give them: connection, choice, love. They always had the potential," Jiwan said. "They just needed someone to believe in them." The smallest cub stirred and looked up at Velkros. It made a small sound, almost like a question. Velkros responded in the Velkari language, a series of growls and rumbles. The cub listened, then looked at Suki. It made another sound, this one more firm. "What did it say?" Suki asked. Velkros's eyes glowed softly. "I asked if it wanted to return to the sanctuary. It said no. It said it chooses you. It chooses to be your guardian." Tears filled Suki's eyes again. "I choose it too." "Then it is decided," Velkros said. "This cub is now bonded to you. It is a great honor and a great responsibility. You must care for each other, protect each other. This bond is sacred." Over the next few days, the Galactic Council held emergency sessions. They discussed the attack, the security failures, and most importantly, what had happened with the cubs. Representatives from hundreds of worlds watched recordings of the battle. They saw the cubs fighting with precision and purpose. They saw the loyalty, the bravery, the love. Wu Jin stood before the council and spoke with quiet authority. "For weeks, you've watched our program with skepticism. You wondered if humans were naive, if we were foolish to approach the cubs with kindness rather than fear. Today, you have your answer. The cubs didn't protect us because we trained them. They protected us because we cared for them. That's the strength of connection. That's the power of seeing others not as they appear, but as they can be. Nari, the human combat specialist who had been analyzing the battle, added her voice. The Cubs are more effective warriors because of their time with us, not in spite of it. They learned control, strategy, and tea,